attending. Great to have so many of you along. I'm just going to do a quick ad before Ray starts. The other thing in the Connect, you will see that the committee is looking for volunteers to join the ARQ committee. We're looking for people with, specific skills because it is a working committee. So if you're at all interested, please feel free to give me a call. If you don't know, I'm Judy Mayfield, as you can see my name up. I'm the president of ARQRV, and Ray, who's doing the presentation today, is the person, if you've looked at the Residence Committee Manual and looked at our website, is the person responsible for all of that. So Ray comes with a lot of skills, and as I said, he wrote the Residence Committee Manual, so you're in good hands with him being able to answer your questions. But if any of you are interested in joining the committee, please feel free to send me an email to President, and I'm happy to chat to you. So we're looking for people who can do community education, anybody with promotional skills, media skills, interest in helping residents deal with disputes, a good understanding of the Retirement Villages Act. Those are the sorts of skills that we're looking for. So that's my ad over, and I'll hand over to Ray. Thanks, Ray.
Well, thanks, Judy. Thanks for the introduction. Following on from our previous two webinars we've had in the past, today's two topics are voting entitlements of residents and then actually the procedures for voting by residents. Before we start, there's going to be a couple of items that I bring up today that we've covered in previous webinars. So if you weren't at the previous webinars, you can contact the office again and get copies of the videos of those webinars, and that'll cover those particular items for you. As we're going through today, I'd appreciate if you were to raise your hand if you have any questions. We'll take the questions as we go. Don't type a question because they're a bit hard to monitor, and also too, it probably takes a long time to type. It's much easier just to raise your hand or use the reaction facility at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand, but don't forget to put it down when you finish. So I'll ask the questions as we go. So, voting entitlements of residents. So where's the source of the voting entitlements? It's actually in the legislation, section 133, subsection 1. I'll read it out to you in the Retirement Villages Act. So section 133, subsection 1, it says, the following persons are entitled to vote at a meeting of the residents of a retirement village. A, either one resident of each accommodation unit in the retirement village, or if the residents have, by special resolution, agreed that each resident of the retirement village should be entitled to vote, each resident of the retirement village. So as you can see from what I've read, the default entitlement is one vote per unit, without a doubt. So, in other words, if there's two people in a unit and you've not changed your voting entitlement by a special resolution, you must have in your village one vote per accommodation unit at a residents' meeting. End of story. Don't forget, if you've got any questions, raise your hand, anything you want clarified. A simple explanation that supports one vote per accommodation unit is as follows. One accommodation unit, one in-game contribution, one residence contract, one contribution to the Maintenance Reserve Fund, one contribution to the General Services Charges Fund, one reinstatement cost, one exit fee, one cost of resale, all supports one vote. Having to that though, residents can still decide to change their voting entitlement in their village. As a matter of interest, any villagers here have changed their voting entitlement? Just raise your hand physically. Someone has over there, Glennie, okay. Anybody else? Okay. Matter of interest, I'll just look at the other screen. Put your hands up if your villagers have changed it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that it doesn't protect the voice of one person in a unit. Okay. ARQRV suggests, hang on, we're going slow. ARQRV suggests that there is one vote per unit, but you still can change it. As a matter of interest, one vote per unit is similar to the voting entitlement in a community title scheme, where the voting entitlement is based on the unit and not based on the number of people that live in it. It's interesting to note when you're talking about voting entitlements, it's common to find that where there are two people in a unit, two residents in a unit, they will lobby and agitate to have a voting entitlement for each person. But they forget that sometime in the future that there will be only one person in that unit for sure. And you know where they've gone. They've either gone into care or they've gone up to the big retirement village in the sky. So at one time, or early in the piece when they agitate for one vote per person, there's two in the unit, but down the track when there's one person in the unit, they're still making the same contribution to all the fees and everything in the unit, in the village, but they've halved their voting entitlement. So those things must be taken into account.
Ray,
another thing, yes, someone's got a question.
I have, but are you going to talk about renters?
Say again?
Are you going to talk about renters?
No.
Can a renter vote, is what I'm saying. Can a renter vote?
If a person is not a resident of a retirement village under their residence contract, they have no entitlement to vote at residence meetings. Thanks for that, Judy, bringing that up. That's one thing I never covered at all. So there may be people in your village that do rent, but at the same time, they may have a right to reside, and they may be defined as a resident. If they're a resident, by definition, under the legislation, they're entitled to vote at a residence meeting. But if they're not a resident, now you're going to ask, how are they going to be identified? It's up to the residents of a village to determine that through their village operator and manager, to have the manager decide, or the legal arm of your operator to decide if they're residents by definition or not. But if they're not a resident, they have no entitlement to vote for things under the Retirement Villages Act or a residence meeting. However, there's nothing to prevent those people, by the same token, being on a group of, say, social group or something like that, but they have no entitlement to vote under the Retirement Villages Act. Does that cover it nicely, Judy?
Sorry, that's really, yes, that does. But can I just explain that sometimes residents in a village will get an ordinary rental tenancy agreement. That's a rental, rental agreement if you're renting out in the suburbs. But the operator may put with that an attachment giving the resident the right to reside. Because as Ray said, the Act says you have to have the right to reside. So sometimes residents' RTA agreements will have that attached. Other times the operators will actually take the same contract as you have, and they will just tweak it to make it a rental contract. And then the resident has the full rights of a resident. So I don't know how you determine that. Sometimes operators will tell you. Other times they say that's a matter of privacy and confidentiality. All you can do, if somebody comes to you and you're not sure, or they may even say, I'm a renter, can I vote? Then you've got to get them to check with the village manager as to, do they have a contract to reside? That often causes us a few problems. But as Ray said, you can vote at social club meetings and bowling group meetings and everything else. It's just the residents' meetings where they're dealing with official business under the Retirement Villages Act.
Oh, thanks for that addition, Judy. Very nice. If a village does change their voting entitlement, a record of should be made in a document that I call a register of important residents' decisions. Every village should have one. It hasn't been raised much in the past. I think I might make an article of it for the Connect in the future, that if there's any important decisions made by residents in your village, that you should record them somewhere in a single place, not just have them recorded in the minutes and then forgotten about in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time. People are asking what happened about such and such, and then you try to find a record of what the decision was. So if you decide to change your voting entitlements by special resolution or anything that's important, it should be recorded in this register of important decisions. And I would expect it to be maintained by the Secretary of the Residence Committee and kept with their documents of the Residence Committee. You'll note that the legislation, when I read it out, section 133 subsection 1, only allows one way to vote at a residence meeting. You can't have voting one unit or one person in a unit having the entitlement to vote, and for other things having a different voting entitlement at a residence meeting. There must only be one voting, suppose, mechanism in the village. You can't have a mix and match, unlike my village did a few years ago. You remember that, Judy? Yeah. A thing to note is that a former resident, if they're paying the general services charges still, if there's anything that needs to be voted on under the legislation, they still have an entitlement to vote, but there's only ever, regardless of what residents have decided, there's only ever one entitlement for the former residents to vote. They both can't vote if there's only one from a unit. I mean, if there's two from a unit, there's only one voting entitlement per unit. Another thing to note is that at residence meetings, the chairperson and all the residence committee have the same voting entitlement as any other resident. They have no special or less voting entitlement than anybody else. The chairperson has no special voting or natural authority to cast a deciding vote at a residence meeting. That should be included in a residence constitution. So it's often the case in community groups where the chairperson has a deciding vote. In a residence meeting scenario, the chairperson should not have a deciding vote. They should just vote like anybody else at the time. And they're not withheld from voting. They're a resident and they're entitled to vote. End of story. Okay. Are there any questions about voting entitlements? And it was pretty quiet.
Peter Thompson.
I thought Anne Gore had gone to sleep. I thought Anne had gone to sleep.
Peter, you will have to unmute. Peter?
Yep, yeah. How's that?
Yep, there you go.
Okay.
Hang on, I'll find you. Wait till I can see. Oh, Peter Thompson. Yeah, right, Peter.
Yeah, yep. Good, right. You mentioned the register of important decisions. Are there any guidelines as to what makes up an important decision?
There's no guidelines, but things that you're going to want to be keeping a track of for the future. Well, for example, the first one is the one we just talked about. There's one. There's others that you might decide to how you're going to pay for a certain thing by special resolution if there's a capital improvement. Anything that you're going to want to know what happened sometime in the future, and you want to look back on it and have a register of it. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head, but it should be kept somewhere. It's just nothing fancy. It's either can be kept electronically or just a paper copy. So what it is, it's probably a copy of the motion and the voting result. You know, like yes or no, it was taken, and the date of the meeting. Probably that's about it. For a matter of interest, Peter, ARQRV, our committee, you know, that runs ARQRV, we've got a register of important decisions, and we keep things in there that we know. Then we can decide, look back and find out what happened.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's not kept from memory, because guess what? Our memories aren't real good for a start, and over time, people move on. You know where they go, and the village residents change and thinks, what did we do about such and such? And we go, no one can find it. And the number of times that we get inquiries from villages, and they've got no idea what happened in the past, where they should keep a list of these things. Okay.
Liz Goodfellow, sorry.
Susie Donahue.
Hang on, Liz Goodfellow, you come from, what do you call it? Lady Smallhaven, don't you?
Sorry.
Liz, unmute yourself.
Got it.
Yeah.
There you are.
Hello, Ray. It's Janice Rossiter speaking from Lady Smallhaven.
I see you there. You know, I saw you straight up. Don't worry, you can't hide.
Churches of Christ have told the Residents Committee that the tenants that we have here are to be regarded as residents. When we asked for a copy of the tenancy agreement to see whether they had given them the right to reside, the request was refused.
That's interesting. Having said that, though, you wouldn't give anyone their personal.
No, you don't ask for a personal.
Yeah, you just want a generic.
Don't ask for a personal. I mean, that must be a standard contract.
No, that's what I mean. You want it. If they say they're residents, I don't suppose, and they put that in writing.
No. Oh, they put it in writing that they've refused to provide a copy of the standard residence contract. Well,
they should provide your response in writing. If you've written,
Ray, they did respond in writing saying that they had refused the request to provide a standard residence RTA contract.
Sorry, but didn't they say that they are residents?
They said they are residents, but when we asked for a copy of the RTA agreement, because Ray has just been saying that that there should be a right to reside on the contract, when we asked to see a copy of that, there was a refusal.
Judy, you can comment. I got no answer.
I think Janice, if you've got to take it at face value. So if your operator is telling you they are residents with a right to reside.
No, they're not telling us that at all, Judy. They're not saying that at all. They're just saying they are residents.
Okay. So then I think, then you've just got to take it as they are residents, noted in your notes somewhere, in your minutes of your meeting somewhere, record it in your special that Ray was talking about, special decisions, and say that you've been informed by the operator that the people who rent in your village are to be regarded as residents, which is what your operator has told you. You can't, and they won't give it to you, but they have put it in writing to you, and you might like to.
And they haven't said that they've got a right to reside. I think that's very, very important. It's all right to say they're residents because the term residents, and then what they follow that up with, they say is they live here, so they're residents.
I know. What you got to do?
They're not covered under the Retirement Villages Act. They're covered under the RTA Act.
Relax. Liz, what you've got to do is write to them and say, for the purposes of the Act as defined by Section 9 and 10 of the Act, are they defined as residents for the purposes of the Retirement Villages Act? And they got to reply.
Okay.
And then you can put a thing at the bottom of it that Section 135, what is it, Section 135,
133.1.
2F, 135 2F. They must, within 21 days after receiving relevant correspondence from the resident or former resident or representative of the resident or former resident, give the resident, former resident or representative of the former resident a complete response to the relevant correspondence. Section 135 2F.
Okay, all right.
And they got to reply. They must reply.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
And they got to reply, and it's the wording of your request has to be for the purposes of the Retirement Villages Act. Are they a resident as defined by Section 9 and 10? End of story. Yes, we acknowledge they live here, but doesn't make them a resident under the Act.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions about
that? Susie, did you have a question? Are you good? Okay. No problem. I don't believe so.
Happy? Everyone happy to go on? Okay, so voting by residents. Okay, now a bit about procedures and things like that. In Section 133 also there's some stuff in there about the procedures for voting, and I'll read it out as slow as I can. I tend to read a bit quick, but I'll try. Section 133, it's headed voting. We talked about subsection 1 before, which provides the entitlement. or subsection 2 onwards provides some procedures. It says the resident's vote may be cast by the resident or a person who the resident has appointed by power of attorney, which is most unlikely, but it may happen, or any other person other than the scheme operator who the resident has appointed by signed notice to vote by way of proxy at a particular meeting stated in the notice. And then it goes on to say a signed notice under subsection 2C appointing another person to vote by way of proxy must not relate to more than one meeting. And then it says a person may not hold more than 2 proxy votes for the meeting. Okay. The legislation goes on to say that a resident may cast a postal vote, but in some cases a postal vote may not be offered. So that just takes care of that. So I'm going to go through voting by proxy to start with. Okay. So at the end of the day, we've probably all got some sort of an idea what a proxy vote is, but I'll read out a definition anyway. A proxy vote is where a resident entitled to vote gives written authority, I'll say written, I'll stress written, to another person to carry or take their voting entitlement to the meeting or to a voting station when postal voting or voting at a meeting. So in other words, they're giving the person their entitlement to the other person, okay? And you'll note that the access to another person, it doesn't say to another resident. They could give their proxy to anybody other than the scheme operator. So it might be the butcher, the baker, or the candlestick maker, but they can give that proxy to another person. At the same time, when they give those proxies to another person, both people that live in a unit may be given proxies, because even though there might be one voting entitlement per unit, the people, the residents that are living in that unit have one voting entitlement themselves for their unit, but they both can be given 2 proxies. So at the end of the day, one unit might be taking 5 votes to a meeting or to a voting station. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? Because it says to a person, the people that are voting under a proxy are not using their own entitlement. They're using someone else's entitlement to cast that vote. And of course, everyone says, how are they going to vote? Well, the person that's giving the proxy should make arrangements to the person they've given the proxy to how to vote. They shouldn't just say, oh, here's my proxy. You should say, here's my proxy and I want you to vote in such and such a manner. And if you don't trust them, don't give me a proxy. You know what I mean? They can still vote in any manner they wish, but they should only vote under your instructions. But the whole purpose of a proxy is you trust them to vote in your manner, and that's why you give them the proxy. But at the end of the day, you can also use a proxy vote form, or shouldn't a proxy vote form, a proxy form that provides how they must vote at a meeting. And if that's what they've given them, those proxy forms with the instructions on the proxy form must be given to either the secretary or the chairperson before the meeting. And it'll have the way that the vote should be cast on that proxy form. And as an example of that, there's 2 proxy forms on our website and in the back of the residence meeting manual, one with instructions and one without instructions. So you could use either, depending on what people want to do. So I'll just go through some notes here about what happens with proxy forms. So I said before, the biggest thing is that people get confused with when a person has proxies given to them. It's not their entitlement that they're using when they're using the proxy. They're using the other person's voting entitlement. The proxy must be given in writing. The authority must be given in writing. You can't insist that you only use a particular proxy form. As long as the proxy form or the proxy authority is clear that who's giving the proxy, who's able to use the proxy, and for what meeting or what purpose they're using the proxy, all those things go together. They don't have to use the official form. For example, someone may be away on a trip on a caravan, and they can send their proxy by email. And if it's clear in the email who they're giving the proxy to and who's given the proxy, and for what purpose, that's fine. You can't make them use the form. You got it? It's not like an election, the government election where we've got to use the proper ballot thing. It's just a proxy. So as long as it's clear.
Ray,
Yes.
if I'm voting and I'm sitting and putting in the meeting and I'm putting up my hands and I've got two hands up, everybody in the other residents are going to look at me and say she's having two.
We're coming to that. That's the next topic, actually at the meeting.
Yeah, okay.
Righto. Yeah, I think I've covered all the stuff about proxy votings. So now we've gone to the meeting. We're at a residents meeting. Forget about proxies for a minute. We're just going to talk about voting at a residents meeting. We'll come back to proxies, the procedures at a meeting in a minute. When there's a residents meeting, you really should have a roll of people, of residents, ready when people turn up at the meeting for them to sign in with their unit number beside them, and they sign into the meeting, and they're given a coloured card or a coloured paddle for every one of their voting entitlements as they sign in. For example, if my wife and I go to our residents meeting in our village and we've only got one voting entitlement between us for our unit, when we go, we both sign in to say we're there, but at the same time, we only get one paddle or one coloured card to denote that we only have one voting entitlement. This way, you don't have people putting up three hands. All this sort of nonsense, or trying to jip the voting system. A coloured paddle or a coloured card, you can buy things at the junk shop, the $2 shop. It used to be the dollar shop, now it's the $2 shop. And even then you can't find things for $2. You can buy little paddles and cards there. You could have paddle pop sticks dipped in paint or something like that. Different colours for different meetings in case people decide to keep them from one meeting to another and cheat. Heard of that before. So you give them a paddle or a coloured card as they come in for each voting entitlement. Is that what you're going to ask, Judy? And if they've got a proxy, they hand over the proxy form to the person that's distributing the paddles. They would sign beside the unit that the proxy's for and be giving a paddle for that unit. Okay? Everyone happy with that?
Sometimes it's better to give a different coloured paddle or a different coloured piece of paper if you are holding a proxy. So you might be holding up, all proxies may be red or blue or something. So then you hold up your own white paddle and you hold up a green or a blue, because then that people know it's a proxy that you're holding up.
Okay, so we've just signed in. We get given our paddles. You can use that roll of residents, of voters, or whatever you want to call them, to work out if there's a quorum or not at the residents meeting before the meeting's open. You can use that roll. I suggest that the quorum for a residents meeting is based on the number of residents entitled to vote. You may or may not decide to include proxies as numbers for the quorum. I suggest, because of the unique nature of retirement villages, meaning everyone's older and that you could, and they're struggling to get to meetings, you could make the proxies part of your quorum, but you don't have to. It's a decision made by residents and put into their residents' constitution. So you have the quorum first, and then you've got a valid meeting, and then when votes got to be taken, that there's enough people to have a valid vote. When you're voting by show of hands or cards or whatever at a residents meeting, the chairperson must ensure that the motion or any motion is clearly worded so residents understand what their no and yes will mean. The number of times that people have gobbledygook in a motion and they get confused whether the right answer is yes or the right answer is no. So you've got to make sure that the chairperson gets the residents to craft a decent motion so they know what they're going to vote for. Does that make sense? There's some of the general comments about it, residents' meetings. No questions? Pretty easy? Nothing, no secrets? Now, and I mentioned earlier, we talked about proxies as you sign in at the residents' meeting, and you sign beside the unit. If you've got a proxy, you get your own paddle for your own vote entitlement if you have one. Your wife might have got it, but it doesn't matter. If you've got a voting entitlement, you get your paddle. But then you sign beside, if you have a proxy, you give the proxy over, you sign beside the other unit's number, and you get given a paddle for that proxy. And then they record these things in the roll of voters. There is an example, you probably can't see it, but Jed had a thing on it. There is an example in the back of the residence screening manual of a roll of electors. Yes, Liz? Unmute, Liz.
Yes. Yeah. Another question. When residents first moved into Lady Smallhaven, some of them were told by the operator that it was only the first person who signed the contract who had the ability to vote. Is that correct?
I can't help idiots, Liz.
Yeah.
If they're idiots, I can't help that. It's
no, but I mean,
nonsense.
that's not. I mean, the operator can't tell people that, can they?
Total and utter nonsense.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Capital N on nonsense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's absolute rubbish. The husband and wife or the partners or whoever they are that live in the unit can battle it out between themselves who's going to have the voting entitlement. But it's only if there's a default voting entitlement, there's one vote per unit, and it's up to them to work out who's going to decide what the way they're going to vote. The battle is on. You've got to wonder what goes through some people's heads and where they get this absolute nonsense from. It's a worry, isn't it, Judy? Fair income.
Look, all that they have to remember is the wife makes the decision. It's really easy.
It's easy. It's easy. It is. It's there's no comparison. So yeah, getting back to proxies then. So if a person turns up and signs in at the residents' meeting, they get given their own voting entitlement, and they might get 2 proxies. So they're going to have 3 paddles. Hang on, 3 paddles holding up. And everyone going, how come they got 3 votes? Well, guess what? They're allowed to have up to 3 votes if they got 2 proxies, but they can't have any more. Okay. Going back to show of hands voting at the meeting, the chair should ask the secretary and another person, but you don't have to, but you ask another person at the meeting, another resident or someone, a trustworthy person, like I wouldn't ask Liz Goodfellow, I'd ask a trustworthy person to count the votes with the secretary, so there's 2 people at least counting the hands and the paddles or whatever you got holding up, just to compare results to make sure you get the same answer. A lot of times you don't even have to worry about it because there's, might be a clear-cut result, 50 hands to 1, don't have to worry about that. But if it's close, and sometimes you might have to do a recount. And if there's 1 voting per accommodation unit, it requires extra vigilance to make sure that people are only voting 1 per unit, okay? I have heard of innuendo allegations where people keep cards and paddles from meetings. They don't hand them back and they take them to the next meeting so they can sneak in extra votes, which is a bit unwieldy. But I suggest that you change the colours between meetings. They can't take this, say you might have a red one meeting and the next meeting you might have a green one and then swap it back again. Judy's looking very disgusted there. Hey, Judy. But
It's
There have
sad
been
that we have to
allegations.
do. It's sad we
There
have
has
to
been
do that.
allegations that some people do that.
Mm, mm.
Can't believe it.
Do that.
Aren't people in retirement villages awful?
Yeah.
Yeah. So rotate your colours through. Okay, now in some cases, there might need to be a secret ballot actually at the meeting. It's unlikely, but you never know that residents at the meeting may call for a secret ballot at a meeting for a particular issue. God knows what it might be, but they may ask for a secret ballot. And if the majority of residents entitled to vote decide that you want a secret ballot at a meeting, you've got to have one. So I suggest that the secretary of the residents committee, every time you have a residents meeting, to take along coloured paper of some description, small pieces, just so people can write yes and no and pop it in the ballot box at the meeting and have enough pens, quite a few pens and pencils to go around. It's unlikely that that will happen, but it can't hurt to be prepared. Because if there's a secret ballot called for and you're not prepared, well, then you're going to be running around looking for pens and paper and all that sort of stuff. But I suggest you don't have white paper. You have, you have bits of coloured paper or something. You don't have anything fancy, but as long as you can tell it's a ballot paper. Again, it's just to stop people having allegations of ballot box stuffing. Again, that's happened too. So I'm told.
Ray, there's a question. Ray, there's a question.
Okay, yes, Pamela, unmute yourself, Pamela.
Peter, just unmute.
Pamela, you had your hand up. Yes, Pamela.
Thank you. Yeah. So, Ray, who would be the one to call if they want a ballot, a secret ballot?
The people at the meeting.
Any resident.
The people at the meeting.
So any resident can just stand up and say, I want a secret ballot.
Yeah, they can ask, and then you put it to a vote, and people say, yeah. If the rest of them, if there's not a majority that want a secret ballot, it doesn't go ahead.
Right. Okay.
You've got to have a majority of people who are entitled to vote to decide if you want to have a secret ballot at the spur of the moment. They might be saying, I think it should be a secret ballot, and if there's someone seconds it, and then it's a motion, then you have a quick vote.
And then you have a quick vote. Okay. All right. Yeah, I just wasn't sure how that works.
It's not one person decides. Everyone.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Okay. Thank you.
Everything that happens should always be by a majority of people entitled to vote, basically, to simplify things.
Peter, did you have a question?
Unmute yourself, Peter.
No, that was my question. Sorry.
Okay, no
You've answered the question.
Yeah, if it doesn't get any traction, it doesn't happen. It's like anything. If you don't get traction on a motion, that's it. End of the story. And it's not the chairperson that decides. It's the meeting decides. You'll find that there's other topics, not topics, but information about secret ballots covered in previous webinars. If you want a copy of that video, contact the office, please. Okay.
Voting about postal votes. Sorry, you're going to talk about postal votes? Okay, sorry, I'm preempting you all the time. Sorry.
That's my next topic, Judy.
Sorry.
You're right there with me, Judy. I should have given you a copy of this and you see. Oh, so my next topic is voting before the meeting by postal vote. So at the end of the day, postal voting only takes place where it's arranged, okay? Some villages arrange it very lackadaisy and haphazard, and other villages arrange it very neatly. We've covered this in a previous webinar, and again, you'll need to get a copy of the webinar video to find out about that. The Act actually says that a resident may vote by postal vote. That's all it says. It doesn't actually say who's got to arrange it or anything like that. So if it's not arranged, it's not arranged. But if you do have a postal vote before the meeting, there should be a mechanism to be vigilant on the voting entitlement and who's voting and how many they're voting. I think in the previous webinar we talked about the 2 envelope system. or you can have voting officials sitting at the box to monitor the box when the box is available before the meeting, where they're going to, when they're going to count them. So I would not have a postal vote box just left out unattended, and people can stuff the ballot box left, right, and centre. Again, I've had those allegations passed on to me from some villages where they're saying that there's ballot box stuffing. Bit ordinary, hey? Maybe we should go to America and have what do you call it? Raid the White House. for the you stole the election. Okay. So if you, as I said, if you want that video, contact the office.
Can I just say something while Ray's looking up his notes?
Yeah.
Those videos, if you want to get a copy of them, feel free to share them with other members, show them at a committee meeting if people couldn't, your committee couldn't be here, or even have a screening, show them to any interested resident. It's not secret business. And the topics that were covered are really broad topics that everyone in the village should know, which would stop a lot of the fighting and so on that goes on. So, feel free to share get copies of the videos or get access to the videos and share them, put them on on a big screen at an allocated time if any resident is interested. It's also a good way to start thinking about and preparing and pre-training your some residents to join the committee at some stage if they understood more what the business of the committee is. So, please, as I said, feel free to share them.
So the first webinar was special resolutions and secret ballots. The second one was what was that, Judy? That was about the minutes function and the minutes of residents committee meetings. And then you got this one. Can't even remember what the fourth one is, but if you want the earlier ones, just
one is bylaws and residents proposing capital improvement to communal funds.
Bylaws, okay, that's a classic. Do we have anyone there from Brooklyn? They're having trouble with
Glennie?
Glennis,
yes. Glenise.
You're from Brooklyn.
Glenise.
Yeah.
Oh, Glennie, unmute yourself, Glennie.
Glenise.
Oh, it's just got G-L-E-N-I. Glenise.
Hi.
Oh, so you've got the doggo.
Yes, the greyhound.
Okay. So we're having one on bylaws. Get your operator there. God. Anyway. Righto. The last thing I want to say about voting, okay? When there's a result from the voting of any nature, whether it's going to be postal voting or voting at a meeting, the secretary obviously got to put that in the minutes, okay? And then the last thing I want to say again is, this is the very last thing, is make sure that any important decisions are kept in, whether they're done postal or at a meeting, in the Register of Important Decisions document, one way or the other. And that way there won't be any argy-bargy in the future. Because I've got villagers contacting me now and they've got no idea on their voting entitlement. They think they got this and they think they got that. They got no record if they ever change it. They think they have, but they can't find where they change it. They've gone back 10 years because they've been in existence many, many years. They've got no idea. So if you don't make a record of it and put it somewhere where it's easily accessed, everyone forgets. Okay. So that was a very short talk today. Any other questions?
Can I just say something about those, particularly the voting entitlements? So, as if I've got nothing else to do, I've been sitting, I see Patricia, yep, welcome Patricia after this. As if I've got nothing else to do, we've been rewriting the constitution in my village. So I've been sitting on that constitution panel.
And you're slow as a wet week.
Sorry?
You're slow as a wet week.
It's taken us, let me say, it's taken us
too much talking.
months.
Too much talking. Too much talking. I would have it done in a week.
Paying attention to what residents want. But what we've decided is that if there is anything that, any decision that's made as a special resolution or anything that impacts the way the village functions, it's going to be added and noted on the back not as part of the Constitution, but an attachment to the Constitution, particularly the voting. So we will actually put that as an addendum to our Constitution, so it doesn't, and it will always be published. When our Constitution is published, we will always have that on the back of the Constitution, an attachment to that Constitution. And then they're not even going to get lost, hopefully, when those sort of important decisions are made. So that's one way you could think about actually doing that. As I said, particularly the voting entitlements.
Just adding to that, you can't change your voting entitlement by changing your Constitution.
Oh, okay.
You've got to, I suggest you'd have to change it by a special resolution which solely deals with the voting entitlement. For example, the motion would be that the voting entitlement be changed to 1 vote per resident. And that'd be the motion. You can't say we're going to change the Constitution or put another voting entitlement in the Constitution and accept that Constitution, because you can accept the Constitution merely by a majority vote, simple majority. Yeah. So you need to do a change to your voting entitlement by a separate motion. Patricia, unmute yourself, Patricia. Is that bottles of wine in the background there, Patricia?
Absolutely, but I haven't started drinking yet.
Oh, not yet. Heck, it's over 10 o'clock. I can see the bottom row there. All the bottles are gone. So I think you might have actually been into it.
Just a question. You know, if you have a ballot box, who can man the ballot box? So can any members of the committee actually man the box, or would it have to be someone?
Okay. The ballot box, there's no legislation or rules or anything. Just think about how elections are done in the community.
Mm-hmm.
They just ask for interested people to become a vote. What do you call it? Election official.
Or something, yeah.
No, the scrutineer duties behind the scenes, they're actually the ones that watch the counting. It's the voting official is sitting at the ballot box. It may be a person on the committee, and it's best if you had 2 sitting there, maybe a person on the committee and someone else. It's just done by expression of interest. I mean, doesn't have to be anyone special. Someone that you trust. I mean, again, I wouldn't trust that Liz Goodfellow, bloody Smallhaven. You wouldn't. You'd have to get someone you can trust. Maybe. I don't know. Glenys. She looks like she's an honest person. But yeah, you get someone that you could just have sitting at the box. I would never have an unattended box. The Act doesn't specify anything about how it's done. It just says the box has got to be available. I wouldn't have it unattended, because people wouldn't be comfortable or confident in the outcome of any sort of vote that was done by an unattended box. It's a bit like if we all voted 2 unattended boxes in the community, we wouldn't be very confident in the outcome, would we? It would be another Trump scenario saying that people did voting fraud. So you need someone sitting there, at least one person with the role of electors. When that person turns up, they either bring their ballot paper with them, or they get a ballot paper there. They sign their unit number to say they voted. That proves they voted, and they have their paper marked and popped it in the box. Everyone's happy. And then later on, before the meeting or when they do the count, the box is handed over by the scheme operator to the chairperson of the committee. They give it to the people that are going to do the count, and then you get people that are going to watch the count, just a couple. Again, in our villages, we try to get JPs, don't we, Judy? Mm-hmm. We get JPs. I don't know why they're no more dependable than anybody else, but at least we feel better about it. And then you have someone that's not involved in the voting, watching. I mean, not involved in the voting, not involved in the counting, at least watching. Okay? And then when you count what's in the ballot boxes, they have a tally and all that sort of stuff, write it all down on a bit of paper. How many yes, how many no's, or whatever the vote was, how many votes were taken, how many informal, and then the people sign it and the scrutineer signs it, and everyone should be happy. There should be no allegations of impropriety there by having a process like that.
And then we've got Glenys.
Hang on a second, Judy. Susie, did you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Laurie.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry,
Can I
Judy,
just
go.
finish? Sorry, can I just add to what Ray was saying, to just add another point to what Ray was saying about the scrutineers? So what in our village is what happens is the scrutineers do the count and they do it before the meeting, not during the meeting. So they get the ballot box an hour or so before the meeting starts. They go into a locked room, they do the count, they put the results, not the ballot papers, but they put the results in an envelope. And the reason we use JPs is they've all got a stamp that says they're a JP. So they put it in an envelope, they seal the envelope, they stamp it with their JP stamp. And then when the results are called for at the meeting, one of the JPs come in and they hand the chairperson the sealed envelope, and the chairperson opens, says to everybody, see, stamps of the JPs are here. I haven't seen this. And they open that locked envelope, that sealed envelope, in front of the whole meeting. So there's no arguments. You know as well as I do that there can often be arguments amongst residents. How do we know it's secure? I mean, it's not, nothing is 100%, but that is the process we use. So that's the way the votes, the results of the votes are handed to the chair at the meeting. Sorry, I just added that to that. Yeah.
We did cover all that in that. Remember? Oh, we didn't cover that bit, but we covered a lot about ballot boxes in the
Previous
first
meeting.
ballots. Who's that? Susie.
Susie. Sorry, Susie.
Good morning. Susie out at Kingaroy. How are you all?
Kingaroy?
Yeah, thanks for a really informative meeting, Ray. It's been great. My question was to you, can you leave a ballot box at reception?
No. You can. There's nothing to stop you.
When it's staffed there? Yep, okay.
There's nothing to stop you. There's nothing in the legislation to stop you, but it's just shit practice. Excuse my French.
It would be there only when our office is open. So it would be a manned box as such.
Sign. They would need to get the residents to sign when they put their vote in. It can't just be there.
Okay.
They would have to see residents sign.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's fine to have it at this reception, but they come in with their ballot paper, or you give them one. They fill it in. They sign the paper, as Ray was saying, for any voting box. The staff,
excellent.
And it's there with the staff, and then they put the ballot paper in, and you've got a record to say, yes, we saw these people vote, and they put their ballot in.
Otherwise, with my memory, I'd turn up 5 days in a row and vote.
Gotcha. I understand where you're coming from. Just a lot of our residents can't be there on the same day, so.
No, you can leave. You can leave the ballot box open for a couple of weeks. It doesn't have to be done on one particular day, but it has to be by a time when it can be. The votes will be counted, or on the meeting day, no more votes after 11 o'clock or whatever it is.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Judy.
You obviously weren't at the first webinar then, were you?
No, I missed it. I'm so sorry, Ray.
So get a copy.
I'll get hold of I will.
And
organise it.
Yeah. So there's no no requirements to have the ballot box attended or monitored in any way, but it's just a good practice. Because residents got to be.
Oops, Ray.
Oops, he's dropped out.
He froze.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Oh, thanks, Laurie. Oh,
no
you can arrange it. Love that. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Glenys, did you have a question that Judy might be able to answer? Ray, he's back.
Oh, Ray's back.
I'm back. My internet dropped out. It just went red. Yeah, sorry. Where was I? I was just saying that residents have got to be confident in the outcome of the votes, because some votes are going to be more important than others. I mean, so they need to have confidence in the outcome. Don't steal the election.
Yep. Glenys?
At Brookland, we have actually been through a vote. And we had several days where two people, it was advertised right through the village, the days that the ballot box would be available. Two people sat and people had to sign on a list. We had a list according to village numbers of units and villas. They had to sign beside their villa and then put their vote in the box. That box then was locked in the manager's office. So each day we went We collected the box and we sat there for a period of time. So people had the time to come down at a time that suited them. I think there were about 4 different voting days prior to the actual meeting. And it worked really well. People just came in, signed their name, put their vote in, and it all worked well.
Yeah, that's the usual process. The other thing is about that, you should also have a couple of columns on that voting roll of their entitlement to vote. Like, did they vote personally? Did they vote by power of attorney or under proxy? Have 3 other columns beside it. So when they vote, you know what happened.
We have done, just after I moved into the village 7 years ago, they did a special resolution that each person can vote. So we don't have to do that. It'd only be a proxy that we would have to record. And so far we haven't had to do that. But it worked really well.
People are entitled to, every person's entitled to give someone else their proxy if they're not going to be there.
Yes, but we haven't had to do that.
Yeah, it should be prepared. And the other thing is someone can still vote by power of attorney too, which is unlikely, but they're entitled to give it power of attorney to someone.
I'll add that to our I'll add that to if we have to vote again. That's a good point.
And there's examples in the back of the manual.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, iPad. Your name's iPad.
Uh-huh.
Oh, no, do it again. Do it again, iPad.
Right, good. Just a general question. I presume there is a link on your website to the previous webinars. Would that be correct?
No, it's not on the website.
Where would I find?
Ask the office.
Contact the office and they will send you the link.
All right, thank you.
So that's the membership number. So either send an email to membership or give the membership number a phone. Don't phone the inquiries number because that's usually the number I hold and I have no idea how to send you a link.
All right, thank you.
Make sure
thank you. No, I was interested in the minutes of committee meetings because at my village, all residents are entitled to receive the minutes, not just the committee.
No,
oh yeah,
right.
Of course.
Yes.
It's the only reason why a residents' meeting exists is for residents. They're entitled to everything.
Yeah. So not the residents' meeting of everyone, but the committee.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, that answers my question. I don't really need to the link. Okay. Thank you.
And the Act is railed. I mean, you'll see that in there, but railed to say the Act there.
It's in the webinar, and we talk about that at length.
Okay. Thank you.
The whole purpose of a residents' meeting is to serve the residents. End of story. So everything that goes on is totally transparent to residents, including.
True. I mean, on most committees, nothing to do with retirement villages. That, for example, a theatre company, the committee meetings minutes go to the committee, not to every member. So
when you better look at the second video too.
That's what I was wanting. Yeah.
Look at number 1 and number 2. You better get both of them and go through that.
Okay, thank you.
Being iPad, hang on, stay there.
What was your name? Sorry, your name.
It came up as iPad.
Everything on the screen just says iPad.
Yes, unfortunately, because I joined the meeting through the link, not through normal Zoom, and it wouldn't have come up that way. My name is Barbara.
Okay, Barbara.
Where are you from, Barbara?
Ormiston Rise.
Okay, I'm just trying to think if I've been there. Okay. Yeah, so look at the other 2 videos. It explains that at length. Okay, any other questions before we finish up? I'm going to go and have a late cup of coffee. Oh, hang on, Patricia's back. Come to talk to me, Patty.
I was just going to say you weren't going to cover committee, voting for the committee.
Voting for the committee?
Yeah, voting in committees.
Well, there's
nothing different.
Well, you vote, you just you use a ballot paper with people's names on it rather than
Why don't you go through that quick process, right?
We can. I mean,
we've got a few minutes.
Okay, I'm just trying to think where I start. Well, you first. you've got to give everyone, if you're going to have an election for the committee, you need to give everyone plenty of notice to get the whole process started. It takes some weeks to get ready and have the notices done, because when there's going to be a meeting and all that sort of stuff, you need to give people 14 days notice for the meeting. And if you're going to do, depending if you're going to vote at the meeting or whether you're going to vote beforehand by postal vote, which one do you want to hear about, Patricia? Do you want to hear about?
Well, I was thinking just a ballot box. So have a ballot box open for a week.
A postal vote before the meeting, okay.
But maybe it makes sense to have voting for the stragglers on the day, because people.
You can have that too. You can have you can have a postal vote before the meeting, and still continue onto the day and have it at the front of the meeting before it starts if you want to.
Yeah,
I'm going to argue with that, though.
Well, you just got to have time to close it to count it.
No, but I'm also going to argue, because how would it be if you'd nominated for the committee and then there's a show of hands and you don't get in? That is not good for anybody to sit and see that, you know, half the residents in this village don't want me to be on the.
Oh, no. You could still have voting as you turn up to the meeting. Sorry, that's what I meant, Judy. Not a show of hands.
In the ballot box.
No, not a show of hands. I mean, as you signed in to go to the meeting, you can pop a vote in at the box sitting there before the meeting. You know what I mean? But you'd have to have time to count everything. Then it gets a bit complicated if you're going to vote. Depends on the size of your village. I mean, if you've got 30 votes in the village, you can vote as you turn up. That's it. You know what I mean? You only got to. Everyone just votes as they turn up to the meeting, or they send a proxy. So if you vote before the meeting and it all goes in there, and it takes 10 minutes to count 30 votes, doesn't it? I mean, you could have it ready for the meeting. You follow? You know what I mean? So depends on how many you got. But if you've got if you're Earlhaven with 10,000 units, and you can't have the voting at the drop of a hat because you've got to have everything. There's hundreds and hundreds of votes to count. So getting back to that, so you've got to start your nominations well and truly in advance. And you've got to have obviously a close of the nomination time, and then you've got to have those people that are nominated to be on the list on the notice board somehow, so people could know who they are. I suggest that as the nominations are received by the secretary of the committee or whoever's organising the election, that the nomination forms get put on a notice board in the order in which they're received, and then those names then go onto the ballot paper in the order in which those nominations are received. That way there's no argy-bargy on how they go onto the ballot paper. I wouldn't put them in alphabetical order. I wouldn't put them in your best friends at the top of any. I'd put them in the way that the order they'll receive. So where am I going with this? So once they're all closed, you then got to give everyone a reasonable amount of time to vote. And I suggest you need to give them 14 days notice before the vote's taken, or before the vote actually closes. You know what I mean? If you've got to give a person 14 days notice for a meeting by the legislation, I suggest that you should give them the same notice before the voting closes. So if you've got to have a time when the nomination's open, then you've got to have a time when there's a notice for the vote, and it's got to be 14 days at least, no more. 14's plenty. Close the vote here. You can do the count, and the meeting can take place straight after that to announce the results.
I think we do. Sorry, I do think we do talk about it in the manual. You know,
it's all in the manual. I think it's all in the manual.
It is in the manual, but I'm just wanting to bring, if your committee has to have, you know, a minimum of 7 people, and only 7 people actually put up their hands, then you may do one of 2 things. You could decide that you will just call that those 7 people are the committee, or are you going to vote and perhaps not have them all in? So that's something that, you know, in my village, we have this strange, well, it is a system that works, I suppose, that even if we've got 7 people, we still have an election, and every single person has to get 50% plus 1 of the votes cast. So if you don't get 50% plus 1, you are not elected to the committee, even if you've only had 7 people nominate. So that can make it difficult, but then mostly people go, oh, we've only got 7 people, we'll just vote everybody on, and they tick every box. But you can decide whether you're just going to, even if you get it, you're still going to have an election and people just tick every box, or you're just going to say those are the people that have nominated, they are the committee.
These things should be in your residence constitution.
Yes.
Then there's no arguments on how it's meant to happen. So they should be in your residence constitution. The reason why some villages have 50% plus 1, which is called majority voting, or it's the same or similar to how we vote in our House of Representatives voting for the federal government. This way it ensures that the person that is actually on the committee is chosen by residents. In a retirement village, it's a bit unique again because we're very personal. The voting is very, very personal in a retirement village. It's not like voting for a politician. We never met him in our life. We wouldn't know him from a bar of soap. We vote for policies and all this sort of stuff. In a retirement village, we vote basically for the person. So it gives an opportunity for residents to vote the way they want to vote and not choose a certain person to be on the committee. And I will say it has worked very successfully 2 elections ago in our committee, in our village, 2 elections ago. People that had bad ideas didn't get on our committee because they didn't get 50% plus 1 of the vote, but we're still able to form a committee. So it does make it harder to get a committee, I accept that, and Judy's always on about that, but residents can decide how they want to have the election run and then have that in their constitution. But I will say, it does say in the legislation, it says the residents of a retirement village may establish by election conducted among themselves a residence committee. It does say by election. So there is some, requirement to have some type of choice of who you want on your committee. That's my view. Judy and I don't always agree on this one.
The other thing is you can choose when you go for a committee voting for the committee, you can vote for the committee. Everybody can just vote for a committee and let the committee choose their own chair, secretary and treasurer.
Basically, yeah.
Or you can have people vote for positions. So I might just nominate for the secretary, or I might just nominate for the chair. And so then people vote whether they want me as the chair or not. So you can vote for positions or you can just vote for the committee. I think voting for positions, personally, I believe that's a bit clunky, but that's entirely up to your village, how you want to manage it. And again, that should be in your constitution.
I reinforce what Judy just said, but my view of the world is the best way to do it is to vote for just the members of the committee. We do that in our village, and then the committee then decides who's going to chair their meetings, who's going to be the treasurer, and who's going to be the secretary. Because when people get voted as chair people, they usually put on a crown and become the king or the queen of the village. And it's not the way it's meant to be. Time and time again, we get people who behave poorly when they've been elected as chair because they think they're the boss. But if they're not elected as the boss by the residents, they're only chosen by the committee, and all they're meant to do is really chair meetings and make sure the committee operates properly. That's all they're meant to do. Not be a spokesperson, not take the place of the committee. So it's best if they don't get voted in as a chair. Okay, and that's all in the model constitution. What's the word I'm looking for? That model is in the model constitution. Those words and those procedures are all already documented in our model constitution. If you want to get a copy of that, it's on our website. Are there any more questions? Nothing? No one?
Can't see any.
Okay, so what's the next webinar? Was it bylaws and what's the other one?
Bylaws and residents proposing capital improvement.
Capital improvement in a village. That's always a tasty one, where it's proposed by residents. So the next webinar is in what's the date?
It's on the 10th of June, Tuesday.
10th of June.
10th of June.
I'll see a lot of you there.
But remember, you can get copies of this one and past webinars as well. So
Okay.
thank you all very much for coming. And for those of you who are on our support desk, the Residents Committee support desk, the next support desk forum is on the 28th of May. Hopefully we'll have department there and one of our solicitors. So if you're not a member of our support desks, please think about joining the support desk as a residents committee, because we hold quarterly Zoom meetings that the Department of Housing, who are our legislative body, always attend, and ask residents and ask feedback from committees perhaps around some of the things they're considering doing. We also get an update on the number of villages, new villages that have registered, and the number of villages that are closing down. And then we've also got a solicitor there who will won't give you legal advice, but you can bring any question that your committee might have, and they will give you a legal overview of the issue that you bring to them. So that's as a support desk member. So if you don't know about the support desk, please again find the membership number or send an email to Laurie, and she will send you details of how to join the support desk. And
on the
that's
website.
annual fee. And you can pay for that depending on the number of units in your village. It varies from $30 for annually for a small village up to $100 annually for a larger village. So think about that if you're not a member of the support desk. All right, that's my ads. I'm only the ad person.
Okay, good boy. Thanks for coming.
Right.
See you next one.
Thank you all very much. Thanks. Okay, bye-bye.